Hey guys, before I get started here, I want to let you know that I have seen the trailer for the Trespasser DLC, and I am super excited for it. This is a video I wanted to make for a while, though, and I really wanted to get it out before the DLC. But I do plan to make a follow-up video as soon as I complete it. Anyway, let's get started. The key is understanding this. No real god need prove himself. Anyone who tries is mad, or lying. That is what we must understand for this all to make sense. This episode is the start of something different for this show. A series of several videos which will all focus around a single topic, the history of Elvenan. To begin, we will discuss the Enigma of Solas. Solas has been established to be Fenharel, the Dread Wolf. Often referred to as the trickster god, Fenharel is notorious for his cunning and deceit. But what are his goals? Why did he do the things he did? To even begin to guess the answer to these questions, we must take a look at the life he has led and the names he has taken. Okay, so I couldn't make this video and not talk about the slow arrow. If you don't know, Felassan is a character from the Masked Empire and acts as a confidant to Briala. Felassan is described as a cloaked Dalish elf with violet eyes and Valisleen. He also carries a staff with a distinct green hue that he can shrink to be much smaller. Following the death of Briala's parents, Felassan takes on the role of a mentor and a friend in her life. But perhaps his most defining trait is his apparent fascination and borderline obsession with Fenharel. He's constantly reciting tales of the Dread Wolf to Briala, and often remarks on how she resembles him. In contrast to most elves, he intends these remarks as compliments. He also knows a great deal of elven lore and history, but he explains it as though he speaks from experience. Sounds a bit familiar. Another noteworthy trait of his is that he sort of goes back and forth between proudly stating that he is Elven, and solemnly expressing disappointment and melancholy in his people. Again, that sounds familiar. For a moment, let's talk about his name, Felassan, the Slow Arrow, a reference to a tale about Fenharel. Throughout the book, there are hints that his name is changed from something else, and that he chose the name Felassan and aims to be just that, the Slow Arrow. At the end of the book, Felassan finds a quiet spot, sets wards, and goes to sleep. Solas describes doing the same thing, but Felassan goes there to meet someone, a meeting that the book says he knew would end poorly. He decided to face his fate rather than run, and he meets with a shady figure in the Fade. As he does this, the book describes him looking deep inside to find himself housed in the shell of flesh, and specifically says, the elf who called himself Felassan. This does not seem so different from Solas, but the very first thing he says to the figure is, I did not receive the Illuvian password. Felassan was on a mission the whole time, and because this is the very first thing he says, I can infer that this was his mission, to unlock the Illuvians of Orlais. Later, Felassan says, you will hate me for this, but she reminds me of... and then he is killed by the figure. What would he have said? I think it's safe to assume he was referring to Fenharel, but what specifically would he have said? What word or phrase would he have used? Well, I think that depends on who the shady figure was behind him. There are plenty of theories about this, but I'm just going to list 3 here. The first one being that the shady figure was Corypheus. We already know that Solas and Corypheus had some sort of interaction before, and we know Corypheus wanted to reach the Black City again. The Illuvians may have been his first choice, and he sent Felassan to learn how to open them. Imshale was needed to activate them initially, and Briala created a password for them. But Felassan did not allow Briala to tell him the password because, as he says to the figure, she deserves a chance to use them for her people. As with any theory, there are problems with this, one being that the timeline doesn't quite line up. Felassan was in Briala's life for a long time, and I'm pretty sure Corypheus awoke after they met. If Felassan was on a mission the whole time, I don't think Corypheus was the one who sent him on it. But in this case, Felassan would have said, "She reminds me of me." Felassan being Solas, working for Carivius, but for his own reasons. It does make sense given the similarities between the two. Common arguments against this are that Felassan has Felassan while Solas does not, and Felassan's violet eyes. It's possible that Solas could have painted on the Felassan for his persona of a Dalish elf, and removed them with his spell later on. As for the eyes, I'd like to thank Girl Tries Games for pointing out that Solas' eyes often appear different colors, and that they are drawn violet in his concept art. However, this doesn't account for his survival. We know Flemeth re-emerged from a wisp of herself, but Solas isn't really implied to have done the same thing. More on that in another video. The next theory is that the shady figure was Flemeth, in which case Felassan merely would have said, "She reminds me of Fenharel." I think this makes more sense, as Carivius wouldn't exactly have a reason for hating Felassan for saying something like that. And although Flemeth is shown to be on good terms with Solas, she may not like the idea of there being another elf like him. Another argument against this theory is that Flemeth had plans of her own and wouldn't have needed Felassan. However, given the apparent relationship between Solas and Flemeth, I can see this as being plausible, but not likely. The last theory is that the shady figure was Solas. In this case, Felassan would have been a servant of some sort, and an ancient Elven.
There are other places, friend, other duties. Your people yet linger. Elven such as you? Yes, such as I.
Solas has shown great regret and guilt for what he has done, and so it would make sense that Felassan would have said, "She reminds me of you." Felassan told the entity that Briala deserved a chance to help her people. He was trying to do what was best for the elves, and perhaps he thought Solas would understand why he did it, even if he didn't like it. Something else I should mention here is that Felassan expresses the desire to be the slow arrow that Fenharel shot, so it would make sense that Solas is the one who sent him. One problem with this theory is that Solas doesn't really seem interested in the Eluvians at all in Inquisition. So if they were part of his original plan, you'd think he'd at least make some sort of reference or comment about them. However, Solas is an enigma, and while I plan to discuss his goals in a future video, we can't really be completely sure of anything. So, to wrap this up, Felassan and Solas are related in some way. This is not new information, but I just wanted to present some of these ideas and offer some things to think about, so be sure to leave a comment letting me know your thoughts on the Dreadwolf and his slow arrow. Okay, now we can move on from Felassan. I want to thank Geek Remix for presenting this idea in the first place, and you can click a link in the description to watch their original video. This is a theory that Solas is Shartan, Andraste's greatest friend and the general who led the legendary slave rebellion against Tevinter, a slave rebellion that took place 1,000 years before Dragon Age, and 1,000 years after the fall of Arlathan. I don't think that time is exact, but it's close enough for me to suspect that that's more than mere coincidence. The ancient elves are said to have practiced a ritual in which they would enter something called Uthanera. It is a rite in which elves would sleep for many, many years, searching the Fade for lost secrets and knowledge. When they would awake, they would share what they had learned with others. However, many did not awaken. For some, their bodies withered as they slept, and they would die while in this state. If Solas went to sleep after sealing the gods away, and then again after Andraste's rebellion, the timeline would match well, and it would account for Solas's tales of exploring the Fade. The problem with this is that he discussed needing to travel our world in order to find new places in the Fade, and he couldn't do that if he was in Uthanera. Perhaps he didn't need to travel our world after all, or perhaps there's something I'm missing. Regardless, it's something to consider. However, this is not the only parallel one can draw about the two. Take a look at this image depicting Shartan. He is shown as being a bald elf with an orb in his hand. You'll also note his lack of Valasleen. You may notice that his ears are round and not pointed. This is because of Chantry and Orlesian politics. All depictions of Shartan were ordered to portray rounded ears, and they also struck his canticle from the Chant of Light. Now take a look at these pictures. On the right, a stained glass depiction of Shartan, and on the left is Solas' tarot card. They are both standing in almost the exact same position. Note that Shartan is holding a key. Why? Well, I could be wrong, but I don't recall any significance of a key in Shartan's tale. So why would he be depicted as holding one? Assuming the connection of him and Solas, it could be the anchor, which is often referred to as a key, or it could mean the orb itself, or perhaps it represents the key to an alluvion. Of course, it's possible that there is no difference, but that's for another video. One last thing on Shartan. In Dragon Age 2, you may come across a pride demon named Hybris. When spoken to, he claims he holds remnants of every fool who held a throne, similar to the spirit Solas mentioned.
I found an ancient spirit who had once been undisputed king of almost every land I had discovered. Like pride or rage, it was the Fade's reflection of a feeling. When I asked which one it was, the spirit faltered. "They've forgotten," said the spirit. "There remains no word for what I was."
But that doesn't quite match up since Hybris identifies as a pride demon. Of course, after Hybris is defeated, he drops a sword that supposedly once belonged to Shartan, indicating that the two may have crossed paths at one point. Perhaps realizing that he had forgotten his purpose is what turned him into a demon. It may be nothing, but I think it's something to consider. Well, that's it for this episode, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. If you liked this video, remember to like and subscribe, and leave comments if you have any ideas for ways to improve the show or theories you'd like to see covered. Thank you again for watching, and remember, tele nadas.